What is going on, guys? Hyper here, and in today's video we'll be talking about the difficulty or easiness of some of the classes in WoW. So people have been kind of bashing on Frost DK in some of my videos where I do a lot of damage, and then I look at the comment section and people just say, oh, you're just pressing 3 buttons, anyone can do that. Then there's people who come up with examples of Frost DK not being that easy, or they give us examples for their classes which are actually difficult according to them. There was actually a pretty good comment thread about a few people arguing what classes are easy, what classes are difficult, what makes a class easy. And I didn't really chime in because I have so many ideas on the topic that I'd rather just make a video about it and share it with you guys. So before we even jump into my thoughts about this, let's just go over what the ideal number of rotational spells is. In my opinion, it's about 4 to 5 buttons with one situational ability, which could be an ability that you just press in like AoE situations, for example. So first of all, we'll have a filler or builder ability. Most classes, if you've played multiple classes, you'll definitely notice this pattern, have an ability that you kind of press. It doesn't do much damage, but you just press it in the downtime. While other classes have an ability that builds their resources. So like for assassination rogues, this would be mutilate. Or for sub-rogues, this is backstab and shadow strike. And then for casters, this ability becomes kind of a filler slash proc generator. For a great example for this is Frost Mage. As a Frost Mage, your Frostbolt is your filler and proc generator. You're casting that ability to get procs for your flurry. And then as a Fire Mage, you cast Fireball as your proc generator to get the heating up that then you can convert with Fire Blast into an instant pyro. As a DK, we don't really have a filler ability. Our only ability that resembles a filler is our Obliterate, which is, 2 runes and it builds our runic power. But typically, fillers are low damage abilities that you use to proc something else. So our Obliterate is actually our highest damage ability in most single target situations, that is. Or second highest if you get Frost Strike first. It kind of depends on your playstyle. But I guess Obliterate could be considered our filler. So then every class should have a core spender and a maintenance spender. So what I mean by that, a core spender is something that you press every time you get to a certain number of combo points, or whatever your alternate resource is, shards or whatever. So for rogues, this would be like mutilate or eviscerate. Envenom or eviscerate. For DKs, this is Frost Strike. Other classes, anything that consumes your combo points or the resource that you've built is your core spender. And then a maintenance spender, which is something that you press every third spender or every fourth, and something that you have to keep up on the target. So for assassination rogues, a great example for this is Rupture. And then for sub-rogues, you have your dot. DKs actually don't have this at all. And some casters do have this, other casters don't. For example, hunters need to keep up their vulnerability debuff on the target. Then warlocks obviously have to keep up their dots, which would be considered maintenance spenders. Then shadow priests need to keep up dots, but as DKs we don't really get this. Next, we would have a longer CD rotational ability. So this would be like Remorseless Winter on DK or Garrote on Rogue, also Toxic Blade on Rogue. And this is an ability that does damage and you use it in a single target situation, but it is not spammable and it's not part of every rotation cycle. So you press it every 10 seconds, every 15 seconds, whatever the cooldown on it is. But basically, as soon as it's off cooldown, you press it and then you just move on. Next, we would get an ability that we only use with procs. Great example for this is Howling Blast on DK, where we only use it whenever we get a Rhyme proc, or Pyroblast on a Mage. You only use it whenever you have an instant Pyroblast, or if you have the Bracer Legendary, then you get then you hardcast a Pyro. Or on a Frost Mage, you only flurry whenever you get a proc. You never flurry outside of procs because it's just useless. And almost every class that I've played has some sort of proc-based system. There's a few classes which don't. Rogue, great example for this. as a rogue, at least for sub and assassination, which are the two talents which I've played in the past and still play, don't have any proc spenders. So it's kind of interesting, but they have other abilities to kind of make up for it. And then every class should have a situational AoE ability, like I said above. So fire mages have Living Bomb, frost mages have Blizzard, DKs have Frostbite. Unholy DKs, you drop the D&D. And this is an ability which kind of counts as a rotational ability, but not really, or an extra rotational ability. But in the same sense, whenever you use this, it typically eliminates the usage of other buttons in your rotation. So this is something that people don't realize, is that even if a class has 8 buttons, some of those buttons might be situational, and in reality, you will only be pressing about 4 or 5. So when we go to AoE, for example, on an assassination rogue, we use Fan of Knives. And that eliminates our usage of Mutilate completely, because our Fan of Knives replaces our Mutilate as a combo point builder and as a damage generator for our combo point abilities. And then as a Frost DK, we Frostbite, and that replaces our Obliterate. So whenever we're Frostbiting, we're never going to weave in Obliterates, because Frostbite is just more efficient. So it doesn't really add a button to our rotation, it rather replaces a button in our rotation. So in my opinion, the number of buttons that a class has and has to press is not what makes classes and this game in general difficult. Because if you're a good player, or if you've been playing WoW for a while, or you've been playing other games and you're coming to WoW, and you just have general good game sense and, hand-eye coordination, and you're able to press buttons on your keyboard, then the difficulty of your class will not be how many buttons you have to press, because we have keybinds. And with keybinds, you can have 5, 6, 8, even 10 rotational abilities, and still have them keybound in a way where you can comfortably press them every time. Obviously, none of the classes have 10 rotational abilities, but it was just a hypothetical situation. The difficulty of WoW comes from the content you're doing, and it comes from the way your class interacts with that content. So as a Frost DK, raiding, for example, and as a melee DPS in general, in my opinion at least, raiding is probably the easier content, high-end content you can do as a melee DPS. Because most mechanics are targeted at range, they have to bait, they have to do movements, they have to do macro movements. As melee, we do reactive micro movements, where a mechanic comes out and then we react to it. As a ranged, if you get caught out in the wrong position, you can very easily die, so you have to keep an eye on what's going to happen next and position accordingly. As a melee, we just do these reactive movements. We see fire coming towards us, we just step to the side. And then the difficulty of the game comes from coordinating 20 people, at least that's the difficulty of 20-man mythic raiding, is coordinating 20 people and getting 20 people to everyone do their job that they have on the fight perfectly, so then you can defeat the boss. And then we go over to the Mythic Plus, which is the only really other difficult PvE content in the game, where melee DPS actually have kind of a hard time, because especially on big pools, you have lack of visibility, there's a lot going on. And then as a ranged DPS, you can kind of step back from that, and you have room to react to things, and it makes your life much easier. I actually had a quite interesting short conversation with my Mythic Plus team about this the other day, where as a rogue or as a DK or tank, I believe raiding to be easy and Mythic Plus to be difficult. And I was talking to a ranged DPS in the group, and they said no, in their opinion, Mythic Plus is easy and raiding is difficult. And that was really surprising, because as you guys know, I don't really play ranged classes too much, and I haven't played a ranged class at a high-end Mythic level in a while. So it was very interesting to see how, depending on what you play, it can make certain content you're doing easy or difficult. So let's just talk a little bit about the skill cap of WoW, and WoW PvE in this specific instance. people have this notion that WoW PvE is difficult content. And if you're a Mythic Raider, then, you know, you have to be absolutely insanely skillful, and, you know, you can't have any mistakes. But the skill cap of WoW PvE, and when I talk about the skill cap, I talk about individual skill caps, so how good a player has to be at their class, is not very high. It's absolutely not very high, and the difficulty, again, like I said, comes from having game knowledge and being able to react to things that are pre-programmed. So if I've done a fight on my DK, and I've done it, I don't know, 50 times or 10 times, or whatever it is, and then I log over to my rogue and I do the same fight again, I won't really notice a difference, because I'm basically doing the same thing. The only thing different is the buttons I'm pressing. And the buttons you're pressing is something that is very easy to do and very easy to learn. And a lot of people have this notion that some classes are super easy, some classes are super difficult, where the reality is that the skill cap between classes is very close together. There's a few outliers. In this case, I would say like Havoc Demon Hunters and Shadow Priest. Those would be the two extremes I could consider. There's obviously a few range classes that I haven't played yet, so I can't really speak to them or about them. But in my opinion, those are the two extremes of difficulty, where Demon Hunter is the easiest and then Shadow Priest is the most difficult. And while it is true that Frost DK maybe lies on the easier side of the spectrum, the difference between a Frost DK, an Unholy DK, and a Windwalker Monk, when we're talking about skill required to execute the class properly, is very low. If a player is good at Frost DK, it is very likely that they can become good at Unholy, or they can become good at Windwalker Monk, or whatever other melee class you can name, in a very short period of time. Because in WoW PvE, everything is scripted. Whenever you go into a boss, you have timers. The boss will do the same sequences over and over and over. Obviously, there's a few examples where bosses act in random ways, and you have to react to it. But for the most part, bosses will just do the same thing over and over and over. Whereas in other games, if we're comparing WoW to other games and the skill cap required, the difficulty comes from being able to react to what other players are doing and what your teammates are doing. A great game for this is Overwatch, where obviously aim is important, but aim is not the only thing that determines how good you're at the game. You have to have good game sense, you have to communicate and coordinate well with your team, you have to be able to react to what the opposite team is doing in a very quick manner, and, you know, set up accordingly. And that raises the skill cap of the game much more. So when we're comparing skill caps and the skill required to play WoW at a top level versus a game like Overwatch at a top level, WoW requires much less skill in general than Overwatch. Now this will be different in PvP, obviously, because you introduce the element of having to react to what your opponent is doing, but this video was just focused on PvE. So overall, guys, whenever someone says that a class is easy, or they're bashing on you because, you know, you're playing a class that perhaps is easier than some others, don't feel bad, because every class is easy in this game. And anyone who is playing a class and, you know, is bashing on these other classes or talents for being easier than his is just fooling themselves into thinking that WoW PvE is actually a difficult game and it takes a lot of skill. But yeah, guys, that pretty much sums up my thoughts about like the skill cap and some classes being easy, some classes being difficult in WoW. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this, and especially my you know, my unholy DKs out there who always bash on Frost DKs for having 3 buttons, even though we technically have 4, which is the same number as unholy DKs. That's all I have for this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, sub to the channel, and you can also follow me on Twitter at Legend Hyperion. I'll see you on the next one.